Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge, episode number 107. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, with a real action-packed adventure show tonight, obviously, because, we often just do a grab bag show and just take general questions, which is always fun and always different. Tonight we're going to be talking pretty much exclusively about the Paris attacks, Syrian refugees, the whole question of Islam in America. Needless to say, there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting I'm going to be doing on that. And the great thing about doing the show, especially with a live feedback, is it gives me a chance to, I don't know if you guys can hear the sirens. I guess they already know they're on their way. It gives me a chance to, hash out a lot of this stuff. So much, this issue is so complex. I know it to many of us, it seems very, very simple. And on some level, it is simple. But there's so much at stake here, not just in terms of the battle for this country, in terms of winning, but also for the battle for this country in terms of winning in a way that it's still America. That's kind of what I want to talk about tonight. And I'm going to start... I'm just going to start with some free association. We got some great questions, and these questions will allow me to elaborate a little bit. But I can at least start here. I'm not going to waste any time with anything else. I am going to waste time with one thing. This is not a waste of time. For those of you who've been watching the show regularly, I know I don't do this ever. But I'm going to start the show, since most people watch the beginning of the show rather than the end, by saying, listen, I thought that we had a calendar year to stop Hillary Clinton and stop the Democrats, and God knows that's important. But after what we're seeing, not just the Paris attacks, but what we're seeing in Europe, I'm going to do something I haven't done before, and I'm going to do it right at the beginning of the show. We need members. I'm going to be bringing this Firewall series back, and it is going to be... I just can't afford to do it. We got paid to do it before. I've been trying like the devil to get... backers, and there's some of that stuff in progress, and I keep hearing that we're going to get, this is all going to happen, it's going to happen. Time is running out. People who watch not just the Paris attacks, but who watch what's happening in Europe and what they are concerned about happening in this country know that the hour is late, and it's much later than I thought. So I'm going to just come out and make a direct appeal. The membership allows me not only to do the firewalls, but it allows me to promote the firewalls. The one thing I learned from the last set of go-round with Truth Revolt was, if I do a video and it goes out there, it might, depending on the links, it might get 50,000 views, 60,000 views. If you put $1,000 of promotion behind it, it goes to 400,000 views. And if you put $3,000 of promotion behind it, it goes to millions of views. And then you can actually get the needle moved. So I'm not asking this for myself. I'm asking this because, as we're going to discuss tonight, this is not just a battle of civilizations. It's a battle of stories. It's a battle of narratives. And I am a genuinely modest person because I've had enough arrogance beaten out of me over the course of my life. But I'm here to tell you, I think I can tell the best story out there, and I think this is the best political messaging in the country. And if you've been a viewer, the Stratosphere Loungers who are watching live are all hardcore people. But if you're somebody who's watching on YouTube and you've been appreciating the work we do, if you could go to BillWhittle.com and become a member, I'm telling you, we need the support, and we need it now because time is short, and we've got to get into this fight. I can only do what I can do by myself. I'm not a wealthy guy, and I don't have tremendous resources, and I need them. So that's the first commercial I think I've ever put on a Stratosphere Lounge after 107 episodes, and I want to put it at the front because I'm telling you, we don't have a whole lot of time in order to turn this around. So anything you could do to help would be greatly appreciated by me and hopefully by the country. I know that sounds arrogant. I certainly don't intend it to be. I just think that somebody's got to tell this story, and that's all I want to say about that. So thank you for your patience. For those of you who are already members, God knows the support that you've given me over the years, and in terms of your unique benefits, you haven't gotten a whole lot out of it, and we're going to be changing that a little bit. But I want to thank you for that. There's one more thing I'll say before I launch into this thing. We got a very busy night tonight. We are going to be doing some more programming. We've just we got ahead of our time over targets, which is members only content. It's 3-minute question. Countdown clock starts at 3 minutes, and then it runs down to 0. And I have a 3-minute thing, and questions come from members, and we answer whatever questions you want. I'm going to be adding a show I think called the Nexus Report, and it's going to be 3 times a week. And because I have to run this as a business, I think what I'll do is something similar to what we do at PJTV. I think I will do if I do 3 of them a week, I will make at least 1 or 2 available to the public, but at least 1 or 2, I haven't decided yet, will be members only. And what this is going to be is it's not going to be a question from the audience, because I love doing those. We've done 100 of them. That's 300 minutes of, was it 5 hours? Of time over targets from the members. But this is going to be 3 times a week, and I'm just going to come in and I'm going to turn on the camera and I'm going to talk about what's going on now. So anyway, that's on its way, and we're going to find a way to get these firewalls done. What we really need more than anything, I've got the means to produce them. They're expensive, but I can produce them. We need them. We need the means to promote them, because the one thing I learned, it's like, it's great to do a tremendous video, and those of you who are fans and have been following me for a long time say it's really important work, and I certainly like to think that it is. But if it's not seen by anybody, it doesn't do any good. So a lot of it is basically the money to promote them. And this is the last thing I'll say. Anybody who watches the show knows that whenever I say this is the last thing I'll say about it, I got about another 15 minutes left to go. But let me just say this. Up until really the Truth Revolt videos, where they were putting some money into promotion, a little money, not a lot, and the viewership went into consistently in the hundreds of thousands and often into the millions. Up until then, I'd been doing essays for a while, but I've been doing videos for about 7 years, and I had never realized that we have a product and we weren't marketing it and we weren't advertising it. And in a way, it suddenly dawned on me, it's like if I was selling Nike shoes and I thought I had the greatest shoes in the world, and I didn't have any advertising money or any marketing money, and I just basically left them outside the factory and hope that somebody will come by and buy them. That's kind of what we were doing before. We really need to get this message out there, and I really need your help. So enough of the commercial, and thank you again for your membership, those of you that are members. And I know times are tough, and I know that not everybody can do it. We're also going to set up, I think, a donation thing, because I know a lot of people don't like the recurring membership thing or whatever, so we're going to get this going. And by the way, I'll post a link back on the Facebook page tomorrow. We have a newsletter that goes out not too frequently, and it's absolutely free. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you get the ebook Best of Afterburner Volume 1, and you just download it. So I'll promote that tomorrow. Enough of the commercial. I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't important. Thank you very much for your time and your patience on that one. So let's get rolling. Okay, look. We have an incredibly complex issue here when we're talking about Islam in America, because what we're seeing in Paris, the Paris attacks and 9/11 attacks and the refugee crisis and all the rest, it's all the same issue. It's all the same problem. And we can talk about things like limiting or banning Syrian refugees, or we can talk about bombing the daylights out of ISIS, and we'll talk about all of this tonight. But we can't do anything unless we get to the fundamentals and really understand what we're talking about. So as I see things, let me get to the fundamentals. I want to say one more caveat before we get started here. I get to watch the comment streams, and like you, I am so alarmed, I'm so disgusted, I'm so full of despair sometimes that when I hear something that doesn't sound quite right, I just want to go off. I'm going to ask for your patience tonight here, okay? There's going to be some things that may sound a little funny, it may sound a little bit like, well, where's he going with this? Just let me finish, please. This is important. So let's get started. There are 2 fundamental premises that we have to understand if we're going to have any chance to solve this problem and win this conflict, because it is a conflict of civilizations. It's not a war of civilizations, but it is a conflict of worldviews, and they're very different worldviews, and they're antithetical worldviews. And so we have to get down to the brass tacks, and there's two things I want to say. Oh, thank you so much, Victoria. BillWhittle.com is where you can go for your membership thing. Duh, just dumb as a box of hammers. All right, so here's the thing. I think there are two fundamental things that we need to understand, and if we don't understand them, then nothing else makes sense. The first thing that we have to understand is that when they talk about radical Islam, when they talk about the terrorists hijacking the religion of peace, that is a lie. It's just not true. It is absolutely true that the huge majority of Muslims in the world are peaceful, kind, decent people. We have millions of them in this country. I've met many of them. They're studying to be doctors. They're as lovely as they can be. They're family people. But the fundamental thing we have to understand is we have to start here. The people who are nonviolent are the apostates. The religion calls for conquest, murder, and violence. If you read the Quran, you know that it is an instruction manual for conquest, slavery, and domination. And if we don't start from this, clear understanding that it is the moderate Muslims who are the ones who are not actually following the dictates of Islam, we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to even get started. All right, we have to absolutely understand that these people in ISIS have the ability to say to moderate Muslims, what does the Quran say? What does the Quran say about homosexuals? What does the Quran say about the rights of women? What does the Quran say about conquest? What does the Quran say about the infidels? The reason that ISIS is growing is because they are, in fact, following the tenets of the religion as it was laid down. If we don't start with that premise, if we continue to say that, these are just some people that have hijacked the religion of peace, then we have got no chance to win this battle at all. None. Zero. So that's the first premise we have to understand. We have to understand that the moderate Muslims, who are in fact the huge majority of the Muslim population, and who in many cases, in most cases, in fact in virtually all cases, are terrific people, they are not the people. They are not the ones. They are the ones who've hijacked the religion. It's the extremists that are following the instructions of the Quran. And if we don't start there, we're done. So every time I hear these guys saying, oh, no, these are just extremists that have hijacked the religion of peace, it's a lie. It's not true. It's not a religion of peace. It's a religion of submission. Islam, right after 9/11, you'd hear these people saying, Islam is a religion of peace. Islam, the word Islam means peace. That's a straight, bald-faced lie. The word Islam means submission. It means submission. And there is the Dar al-Islam and the Dar forgotten it. The Muslim religion divides the world into two camps. There's the House of Islam, which is the house of peace and submission, and the house of war. If you're not in the house of submission, you're in the house of war. Somebody's going to tell me what the other Dar is. I used to know it. So, look, we cannot begin to talk about this issue if we do not understand that it is the radicals who are following the tenets of the Quran as the Quran is written. And as a quick aside, for those of you who say, no, the Quran is filled with all these lovely verses about being kind to people. One of the fundamental things you need to understand about this religion is this concept of abrogation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. There are people far more versed than I am in this. But essentially, the concept of abrogation in the Quran says that if there is a surah or verse in the Quran that contradicts another surah or verse in the Quran, then the one that was written later takes precedent over the one that's written first. It abrogates it. It disqualifies it. And so when you look at the Quran and you understand the history of the Quran, you realize that all of these verses that are quoted by the apologists for these Muslim terrorists, oh, no, love thy neighbor, no. They happened earlier in I think it was the Medina period of the Quran. And as the Quran was written over time, as Muhammad continued his conquest, Muhammad became more and more bloodthirsty and more insane, frankly, in my opinion. So to make as simple as I can, if there's a verse that says, love the infidel as you would love yourself, and another verse that says, chop off the head of the infidel wherever you see him, if the verse that says chop off the head of the infidel wherever you see him was written after the one that says love the infidel as yourself, and I'm not aware that they ever wrote that, by the way, in the Quran, then the second verse abrogates, it negates the first one. It simply disqualifies it. So when people start, when Darulab, I think, yes, thank you. So when people start saying, no, there's all these lovely verses about peace, love, and happiness in the Quran. First of all, many of those verses apply specifically to Muslims and not to anybody else. But more importantly, if there is a verse that says one thing and a verse that says the other, then the question is which one was written later. And as it turns out, all of the violence, all of the calls to murder, all of the slavery, all of the instructions, hudna, jihad, all this stuff, all happened later as Muhammad got more and more successful. So we have to start here. We have to start here. Now, that's the first premise that we have to start with, is that idea of the fact that it is the moderate Muslims who are not obeying the conventions of their religion, in the same way, by the way, not to single Muslims out, in the same way that virtually all of the Jews in America don't observe the Sabbath. I know a few Orthodox Jews who can't ride an elevator, can't use a microphone, in the same way that many, many, many Jews are not observant of the actual laws that are written in the Torah and the Talmud, and yet are perfectly good Jews, and they're perfectly good believers, and they're lovely, decent people. They are also not obeying the strict commands of their religion. Judaism calls for people to wear beards. You shall not take a blade to your face. Some people kind of finesse it, saying, well, a razor's not really a blade. I'm not shaving, I'm using it. My point is, modern Jews are not, most of them, with the exception of the Orthodox Jews, most of them are not constrained by what the religion says. But the religion does say that, right? It does say it. So if you have a radical coming to you and say, this is what the book says, they've got an argument. We clear on this? ISIS has an argument. ISIS can go to moderate Muslims and say, you are not real Muslims, and the reason you're not is because of this, and this. Sharia is what the Quran calls for, and to the degree that people abandon Sharia in this country, great. That's great. That's fantastic. But it's not the radicals that have hijacked the religion. They are speaking the truth about their religion. That is critical. Now, the second fundamental thing that we have to understand if we're going to have an intelligent discussion about what we're going to do about this issue is this. If you accept, and you don't have to accept it, it's true. I'm sorry, I hate to be a dick about it, but it's not up for discussion. That's what the Quran says. The Quran says that you cannot insult the Prophet, that if you insult the Prophet, it is punishable by death. The Quran says that if you are a Muslim and you decide to leave the religion of Islam, that is also punishable by death. We clear on this? This is not up for discussion. That's what it says. Doesn't say it in one verse like that one line in Leviticus. It says it everywhere. Okay? Now, if it turns out that that is true, and it is true, that's what the Quran says, and if it also is true that the United States Constitution and the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights says you have the freedom to say whatever you want to without slandering somebody, that's a civil issue. It's not a government issue. It's not a rights issue. You get a civil issue. You can say whatever you want to in this country. If you want to insult the Prophet of Islam, you can. If it also is true that the First Amendment protects your right to religion, and the First Amendment says you can become a member of any religion you want to, you can leave a religion. You don't have to have a religion. It's entirely up to you. If this freedom of speech and freedom of religion is the core precept, the First Amendment, the primary right of the American method of philosophy, the American system of belief, if that is true, and it is, and if the Quran is also true and says you are not allowed to insult the Prophet of Islam and many other things that you can't do or say under penalty of death, and if you leave this religion, you deserve to die. These two things are not just incompatible, they are antithetical. They are directly opposed to each other, and there's no way to square this circle. You can't have it both ways. There's no middle ground. You don't get to murder homosexuals on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays and leave them alone on the rest of the week. There's no halfway between free speech. There's no halfway between a death sentence. So, now we're down to the brass tacks. And what the brass tacks really mean is this. Islam as practiced in the Quran, Islam as preached by these radicals, is antithetical to the American system of beliefs. It's not just a bad fit. It's not just different. It's not like a Buddhist coming here. It's not like Jews coming here. It's not like Catholics coming here. It's not like any of those people. It is antithetical to the core of their religion, and they have to make a decision one way or another. And now we're getting to the real meat of the matter, because the war is for the middle. The war is for the middle. The war is for the middle of the Muslim population, which currently is overwhelmingly moderate, and I don't want anybody to have any misunderstandings about this at all. This is my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. And I frankly don't think this is up for discussion. If you believe in this country the way I believe in this country, you have to understand that Muslims that come to this country live under the laws of the United States of America, practice their religion in private. They're not seditious. They're not trying to overthrow anything. They're decent family people. They're hardworking people. I've met scores of them. There are millions of them here. Virtually all of them here. These people are as American as anyone else, and they have the right to be in this country as much as anybody else. They have a right to religion as much as anybody else. I cannot say that enough. You're going to say it all day. I'm just going to take that as read, okay? That is a fundamental belief in American system, and if we lose that, we've lost our soul and we're not worth saving. If we decide to prosecute or persecute the people who have done nothing wrong, we're not America anymore, right? We have got to start with this position, and now we can actually start to get down to what we actually have to do. Because the left says, as always, they want to demonize everything. They want to say, well, you're trying to block Syrian refugees because you hate Islam, and you're trying to do this because you hate Islam, and you're racist, and you're all this other stuff, right? Look, we have had waves and waves and waves of immigrants into this country and refugees into this country, and prior to Islam, we haven't had any of them, none of them, the Chinese, the Italians, when this country was founded by the British and the Irish began to immigrate, there was enormous backlash, a great deal of rage and violence, that the Catholics were going to come in and ruin everything. But the difference between Catholicism and Protestantism is not antithetical to the U.S. Constitution. Likewise, when the Italians came in, more Catholics coming in. Did that mean that you couldn't be a Catholic and an American? No, it didn't mean that at all. When all of the Chinese come in, and all of the Asian immigrants coming in with Buddhism, is that antithetical to American values? Not at all. Not at all. None. But this religion is. It is. It is antithetical to American values, and everybody understands this. It's not up for discussion. So the big question is, when a Muslim decides to come to this country and live here, they have to make a decision. And that decision is, are we going to pick American values or are we going to pick Islamic values? We have to pick one, because we can't do both as the Quran and the Constitution are written. And as it turns out, the huge majority of Muslims make that decision every day, and they're fine. They're perfectly fine. They're lovely people. They have decided that they don't need to overthrow this government. They've decided that they don't need to throw acid in their daughters' faces. They've decided that they don't have to perform genital mutilation on their kids. They've decided that they don't have to cut off hands for thievery. They've decided that they don't have to throw homosexuals off a building or crush them. They don't have to murder the infidel. They don't have to do any of that stuff. They've made a decision, and it's not just America, it's in the West in general, made a decision to take Western values over the Islamic values as they're written. And this is where the battle is, because what ISIS is trying to do is ISIS is trying to provoke the kind of backlash that is going to take the middle of the Muslims in the world and move them towards the radicals. That's why the left says, well, we can't fight them. You see, if we fight them, they just win. They want us to fight them. So every time we fight them, every time we fight back, they win and we lose. That's pathological insanity. It's suicide. I'm going to show you how we can fight these people and beat them and win. But this idea that by fighting back we are somehow just somehow racist or Islamophobic, that ridiculous word. No. There is a significant percentage of the Islamic population that is calling for a worldwide caliphate. They're using terror to intimidate the West. They're using their birth rate to outgrow the West. They're going to outvote the West, if nothing else. They won't wait that long, because they never wait that long. They're too violent, these radicals. So here's the point I'm trying to make, the mega point. Okay, here's really where the fight is. Let's take a look at Europe, because Europe is much further down the road than we are. They've been admitting these Muslim populations for 20 or 30 years now. In France, these banlieues, these ghettos, basically, these all-Muslim enclaves, have been there for 20 years. And the first group of immigrants were trying to assimilate into French society. France is not America. We're a nation of immigrants. They could take the people in. And the reason, and this is why this issue is so complicated, the reason that Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Belgium, France, Germany are taking in so many Muslims is because their socialist welfare state is a pyramid scheme. In order to have cradle-to-grave socialist benefits, you have to have more people at the bottom than at the top. 4 people can work to support one person their entire life, but one person cannot work to support 4 people for their entire lives. So they admitted these huge numbers of these Muslim immigrants in order to maintain their socialist utopia. But at the same time, because they're not a nation of immigrants, Germany's not a nation of immigrants, neither is France. It's not a multicultural society. They lecture us all the time on our racism. But prior to this giant immigration wave 20 years ago, there were, there 4 black people in all of Germany? Give me a break. The French lecture us on our racism. The only 2 black people in France were Billie Holiday and Paul Robeson, right? I mean, now they've imported these populations because they know their birth rate is so low. The birth rate's so low because why would you have kids when you have cradle-to-grave socialist benefits? So they've imported these populations for years now. The first group of people tried to work hard, tried to become Frenchmen or Germans or whatever. They tried to assimilate, and because they were a relatively small percentage of the population, they played by the rules. But they weren't accepted, not in the way that you're accepted in America. If you raise your right hand and you take the oath of citizenship and swear to be a new person like the rest of us, e pluribus unum, you're a new American. You're as American as the people that got off the Mayflower. That's not true in Sweden. It's not true in France. It's not true in Germany. And despite the fact that the elites were bending over backwards to tell the people that's what they were doing, it wasn't happening. And so as time went on, these little enclaves became more and more self-contained. And basically, going back to the example of France did to their Muslim population what we do to our black population, which is we bribe them with money so that they don't riot and kill everybody. That's a whole nother discussion. But that's basically what they did. Here, we'll give you more benefits, we'll give you more benefits, we'll give you more benefits. We know you're violent. We're not going to go in there. We're going to let you have your own little neighborhoods. And the police go in there to arrest a rapist. And the next thing you know, the entire community comes out, and then 4 police cars are hightailing it out of there, and everybody's throwing rocks at them, and they're screaming Allahu Akbar, and they get more and more confident. They get more and more radicalized. They get more and more sure they're going to win. And when the police hightail it and don't come back with armored personnel carriers, they know who's going to win. So here's the mega theory. This is my mega theory and essentially my mega strategy. Most people want to live their lives in peace, and this is true for Muslims as true as it is for anybody else. So the question is, what happens to the middle? What happens not just to the middle of Muslims, what happens to the middle of society? If you have a narrative which is the radical Islam narrative, and you have against it the narrative which in this country is still pretty strong, the American dream narrative. Live your life, knock yourself out, go as far as you can. That's why we're not in the kind of trouble that Europe is in yet. Then these 2 narratives are in competition, and anybody who can see the benefits of living in America and peacefully and prosperity and stuff, that's why the huge, enormous majority, I mean, virtually it's 99 point something percent of American Muslims are law-abiding people because we've got a better story to tell. But in Europe, in France, and in Sweden, there is no counter story. There's only the jihadi story. And every single time that the West backs up, every single time that they surrender, you have to ask yourself, if you are a moderate, you have to ask yourself, what is going to happen? What side should I be on? If in Sweden these rapes can continue, and the response of the Swedes is not to crack down on these people and put them in jail and deport them, but to basically say, you know what, Swedish women, maybe we shouldn't dress so provocatively. You know, it's a cultural thing. You know, maybe we should let the worst possible thing that can happen to a woman other than being killed, and you may want to make the case it's worse than being killed, we're going to allow that to happen to our own women because we're so terrified of these people and we need them so badly. What does that say to the moderates in that society? What does it say to the moderate Muslims? What does it say about who they think is going to win? So if there's a narrative on one side, which is the jihadi narrative, and there's no narrative on the other side at all, where do you think the middle's going to go? Of course they're going to go to the jihadis. Of course they are, even though they're not inclined to do that. So When we talk about fighting back against ISIS, it's not just bombing them into the Stone Age, which I am about to get into and I'm 100% in favor of. But you cannot, again, the example of Europe is much clearer than America, although God knows we're heading that way. If you are basically saying to the jihadis, to the radicals, if the radicals can stone a police car or 6 police cars or 5, I've seen it with my own eyes, if the police can come into a neighborhood to make an arrest, and instead of them making an arrest, they are chased out of their own sovereign French soil by these radical, young, bored, angry, furious, desperate Muslim men. If the police hightail it out of there while rocks are being thrown at them and everybody's screaming Allahu Akbar, it not only emboldens the radicals, obviously, what do you think it does to the moderates? If you are a moderate in that society, what side do you think is going to win? And furthermore, it's not just a cold calculation, well, I suppose the jihadis are going to win, I'm going to get on their side. If the French people are not standing up for their own laws, if they're not willing to enforce their own laws, if they're not willing to support their own culture, if it turns out, I forget where it was oh God, I don't know, it was one of the Scandinavian countries, maybe it was Britain, I don't think it was Britain, but where the first gay woman archbishop says, we're going to take crosses down from the churches. We're going to take our crosses down because it might offend the Muslims. What does that say to a moderate Muslim in terms of which way this thing is going to go? Right? What do you think they're going to do? So my entire point here is, aside from the military stuff, which we're going to get to in a minute, if we don't tell a better story, look, it's not a question of stories. If we don't believe in ourselves, and they do, who do you think's going to win? Why do you think so many Westerners are joining ISIS? Why do you think so many Americans, not huge numbers yet, but so many Brits and Frenchmen and Germans, why do you think these people are going to a hellhole, changing their religion, growing beards, and fighting for ISIS? Why do you think that is? I'll tell you why it is. The reason it's so much more prevalent in Europe than it is in America is because ISIS believes in something and Europeans don't believe in anything. They don't believe in themselves. They will not defend their culture. They show it all the time. And so, what would you do? On some level, when I think about this president, and I think about, and we'll get to him too, when I think about the surrender and I think about the self-hatred and the constant lecturing about how bad we're, on some level it makes me want to go join ISIS. It's like, I want to be around people who believe in something and are ready to fight for it. I want to believe in something, I want to fight for it. So, there it is. We not only have to perform these military strikes on these people, which is a lot easier than people think it is, but we also have to understand that if we're not ready to stand up for our civilization, then the people that are trying to destroy our civilization are going to win all of the middle. It's just a matter of time. And one of the things we have to look at is this birth rate issue. That's a whole other story. I'll get to that when we get to the questions. That's my mega theory, right? We can win this thing, and I mean win it permanently, because it is a clash of civilizations. It's the 21st century versus the 7th. It's freedom of thought, freedom of belief, it's freedom of action, it's individual responsibility, and it's equality for women and homosexuals and all the rest against a 7th century barbaric, brutal, murderous regime that's not only at war with America, it's also at war with Germany, and it's at war with France, it's at war with England, it's at war with Belgium, it's at war with Holland, it's at war with India, it's at war with all the countries in Africa, it's at war with China, it's at war with Russia, it's at war with everybody. One of these two things is going to have to win. And the one that's going to win is going to be the one that tells the best story about themselves. That is the most compelling vision. And if the President of the United States gets up in front of the United Nations and says that the future does not belong to those who insult the Prophet of Islam, he has basically said that he's on the side of the Muslims. Because these are antithetical beliefs. Can I insult does my First Amendment right to insult Muhammad exist? Yes or no? And if the president says no, the future does not belong to you who wants to insult Islam, then he's basically saying the future belongs to those people who don't insult the Prophet of Islam, and those are the Muslims. And so if you don't think that this affects the way people in this country think, if you don't think that if you don't think that we're not ready to defend ourselves, then what would you do? What would you do? There's the problem in a nutshell. So, we have a military solution, we have a political solution. So let's get down to some questions because I think they cover pretty much everything.